Thanks a lot for staying with us here at CNN News 18. You're watching PlainSpeak. I am Ridhima Bhatnagar. It was essentially a no contest, but still has been full of twists and turns. The voting for the presidential election concluded today. India will get its new president next week, with the current president Ramnath Kovind's term ending on the 24th of this month. It is history in the making. India is all set to get its first tribal president in the form of Draupadi Murmu. But while numbers were always in the favor of the NDA's candidate, it actually has been the surprise support for NDA's candidate that has put the opposition in a spot. Draupadi Murmu as a tribal face has forced even the staunchest critics to support Draupadi Murmu. But what we saw play out today was just beyond surprise voting. We also saw cross-voting by opposition party members. But it's not just that. The opposition's presidential candidate Yashwant Sinha has now alleged that money is playing a role in these polls. Well, it's not just about the presidential elections though. We also now know the vice president candidates both for the NDA as well as the opposition. For the NDA, it's the ex-Bengal governor Jagdeep Dhankar, and for opposition, it's Margaret Alva. Both the candidates have served as governors, union ministers, and they share a Rajasthan connection. While Dhankar is a native of the state, Alva has been its governor. The vice presidential election is scheduled on the 6th of August. The question that we're raising actually this evening is, has this actually been a missed opportunity as far as the opposition is concerned, now that so many surprise supports have come for Draupadi Murmu and also cross-voting that has taken place? But I'll take that to our guests in just a bit. First, we want to talk about the presidential candidates and the story behind them. Draupadi Murmu, as I said, is all set to become India's first tribal president. Of course, another woman president after Pratibha Patil, NDA's candidate. Support includes all NDA parties, but you've seen some surprise support as well. She's seen support from JMM, YSRCP, SBSP, and the JDS as well. Then, of course, the opposition's candidate was Yashwant Sinha, supported by UPA allies TMC, SP, MIM, TRS, and the Aam Aadmi Party. But it's interesting because we heard from the TMC that if we knew about Draupadi Murmu earlier, possibly things could have been different. But as I said, this is where the story gets interesting. The surprise supporters, Shiv Sena, the Uddhav camp, you had MP and MLA after in numbers reaching Uddhav's residence asking to show support to Draupadi Murmu, and as I said, the other parties as well. For Yashwant Sinha, as I said, it was the TMC which in fact said that if we knew about Draupadi Murmu earlier, possibly things could have been different. But as I said today, it's not just about the support as far as Draupadi Murmu is concerned. The problem for the opposition is in what I'm going to just put out for you, which is cross-voting that we have seen. Mohammad Mokim, Congress MLA from Odisha. You also have Shivpal Yadav from the Pragatishil Samajwadi Party, and you also have another NCP MLA from Gujarat as well, who've all voted in favor of Draupadi Murmu. What does this then mean as far as the opposition unity is concerned? Has it been a missed opportunity? Should there have been a better candidate? But as I said, today the story is not just about the presidential elections, it's also about the country's next vice president. The NDA's candidate is Jagdeep Dhankar, the ex-governor of Bengal, versus Margaret Alva. But why has the NDA gone with Jagdeep Dhankar, and what is the significance? Let's break down those details as well. Son of a farmer gives message that BJP is a pro-farmers party. Kisan Putra is what we heard as far as the NDA's announcement was concerned. Influential Jat leader aiming to get Jat voters to their side in Rajasthan and Haryana, where polls are due soon. But as I said, both Margaret Alva and Jagdeep Dhankar actually have a Rajasthan connection. Constitutional knowledge served on key committees in both Lok Sabha and the Rajasthan Legislative Assembly, so that will also help as far as decision making is concerned. Political and legal experience and expertise may help BJP in passing bills in the Rajya Sabha and facilitating agreements to run the House as well. So a lot of experience that will come into this key decision making. Political and legal experience, as I said, has support of all NDA allies, the BJD, the AIDMK, and the YSRCP. So as I said, the story today is not just of the presidential election, but of the VP candidature as well. So from the vice president nominations to the president nominations, has this been a missed opportunity by the opposition? we also now introduce our guest who are joining us this evening. We have Member of Parliament from the BJP, Nupur Sharma. We have Congress spokesperson, Aishwarya Mahadev. We also have Member of Parliament from the TMC, Dr. Shantanu Sen. We have Senior Editor, Swarajya Magazine, Tushar Gupta. And we also have Rashid Kidwai, an author. Good to have all of you on the broadcast with us. Aishwarya, I'll begin with you. As we said, it's not just about the surprise support that we saw from Draupadi Murmu. Of course, it's very difficult to contest when you have a woman, and that also a first tribal president for the country. Party after party, we saw supporting Draupadi Murmu. Even the likes of TMC had a bit of a shaky ground, saying that, if we knew about Draupadi Murmu, maybe things would have been different. So I want to understand, is there now a feeling that possibly there could have been a better candidate other than Yashwant Sinha?
Good evening. I think two responses to that. First and foremost, the manner in which, and I think in the courtesy of parliamentary democracy, over years, you always see the government and the opposition having an open discussion about the possibilities, if there can be a consensus, as there has been. And in the case of Ms. Draupadi Murmu, you realize that the opposition was having a conversation. We were trying to see, there were also reports that Mr. Nadu also had approached opposition parties about looking at the possibility of a candidate. And what you ended up seeing was, after the opposition was kept in the dark and chose who they had to, you saw Ms. Draupadi Murmu coming out. All power to her for what she represents, and optics wise it's wonderful. And the second response is that very singularly the BJP should not just use her as a rubber stamp because she represents something, and rather use the fact that a woman like that has come forward, is now going to be in all probability holding the highest seat in the land, and they use that as a tool to empower further in that community all across the country. And this is not a missed opportunity for the opposition whatsoever. We want a responsible president. We want a responsible person who will go beyond just mere figurehead, because we've seen what's happened in the past few years. And the opposition wishes her all the best, and we hope that the vice presidential candidate, Miss Margaret Alva, is one of the tallest women of a minority community who has come forward and served in some of the highest posts. We hope that, in a lot of ways, that the government will see in merit in also looking at the opportunity of two women holding the highest offices in the land. And we think that's an opportunity for them to be bipartisan and also magnanimous in terms of how they elect representatives to this very high office.
Anurag Sharma, let me bring you in. Essentially, the point that Aishwarya is making, that is this just being about optics today, or is this about the ideology? I'll talk about that in just a bit. But the larger issue that the opposition seems to be saying, that there was no reach out as far as the NDA is concerned. If there was a better reach out, possibly things would have been different.
I don't think that's technically correct. One, Mr. Nadda, the Honorable President of the BJP, and a senior leader like Rajnath ji went and met the opposition leaders and said, let's discuss this. And you went and announced a candidate. So you could have waited a little more time. We would have got back to you. We were looking at analyzing various candidates across the country. A lot of people had applied for. And the BJP would have got back. So I don't think so. Our intention ever was to really try and bulldoze the opposition by nominating someone like Murmuji. And I think when you did get a candidate of Murmu's stature and the way she's functioned in the Jharkhand, state of Jharkhand, then you really notice that she's done so extremely well. She's never going to be a rubber stamp. You could have at least then gone and withdrawn, because the first 3 or 4 candidates the opposition had in their mind turned it down. You could have withdrawn Mr. Yashwant Sinhaji's candidature. You could have had a popular choice across the country.
I'll take that to Aishwarya in just a bit, but I want to bring in Dr. Shantanu Sen as well. Dr. Shantanu Sen, as I said, post the announcement of Draupadi Murmu as the candidate for the presidential poll by the NDA, we saw party after party coming in support. As I said, the staunchest critics also came out, because you want to be today seen on the right side of history when you get India's first tribal president. As far as even the TMC is concerned, Mamata Banerjee said things possibly could have been different if Draupadi Murmu's candidature was known earlier. So I want to understand, is there a bit of regret as far as the opposition is concerned over the choice of Yashwant Sinha today? Because numbers were never in the favor. It was more about what this means as far as the opposition unity is concerned. But that also seems to be dwindling with the kind of support that we've seen for Draupadi Murmu.
My humble submission to all through you is, please, for God's sake, don't play this tribal card once again. We all remember few years back there was another tribal candidate for the same post which was not supported by BJP. Number two, we clearly remember after the nomination was filled up by Draupadi Murmu, electric light pole was installed at his residential place. We still remember only few months back, a tribal lady was molested at a distance of nearly 5 to 6 kilometers from presidential house. We still remember how the entire tribal communities are deprived in the country. So for heaven's sake, by putting Draupadi Murmu forward, don't play this tribal card. By putting Jagdeep Dhankarji, don't put this farmers card. India has seen the worst possible farmers protest. India has witnessed minister's son is running over the protesting farmers. So for heaven's sake, don't play these cards once again. And let me tell you what our madam has said. BJP has absolutely ruined the basic spirit of cooperative federalism. Our madam has categorically said they are our opinion, but they never shared their opinion before. That's why my chief minister, my party supremo has categorically mentioned, if there would have been any prior discussion, which is the rarest.
But the BJP is refuting that, saying that there was enough reach out that took place. Despite that, we didn't see the opposition change its candidate or pull out and say that let's just have popular support as far as Draupadi Murmu is concerned. That gap was there as far as the BJP is concerned, but it never happened.
Madam, I would like to remind you from, in comparison to 2019, in 2020 by 1 year, crime on tribals has increased by 25%. And once all the 18 opposition parties sat together, once they have come up with a name, they have declared their candidate. Later on, NDA declared its candidate. So now there is some compulsion, it can be done once it is declared. So it's absolutely BJP's ploy. They never wanted to give importance to the cooperative federalism. And for heaven's sake, entire India knows how the Dalits are deprived. Entire India knows how the farmers are deprived. So by putting a Dalit in the form of presidential candidate, or by putting a son from a farmer's family as a vice president candidate, for heaven's sake, don't try to play this. The main reason of this is, in the coming elections to be held in 4 assemblies, there are 138 ST-dominated assembly seats, out of which BJP could own only 35. So that's why they have.
I'll go to Tushar and Rashid also in just a bit, but I want a quick response from Nupur Sharma. The criticism coming in is that this is just a ticking of various boxes. For Ramnath Kovind, it was the Dalit support. Here it is a tribal support, but nothing on the ground really is changing. This is just optics as far as the BJP is concerned.
I like to dispute this. One, of course, Bengal has a completely different history. I don't want to get into that. Bengal not supporting the Adivasis or the tribals, we all know. Now, let's just go back and see the amount of houses which have been built. Most of them have been built for the SC and the ST community. I'm one of the few MPs who has an ST population in UP. We have a special chief minister scheme running for the STs. I have what are called Saria tribals in my area, the Adivasis. They get houses on a priority. Secondly, the JAM, the Aadhaar, mobile and linking of their ration cards, they are the ones who benefit the most. Last 70 years, what has really been done for the tribals? What the BJP has gone and done, no party has ever even attempted it. We have gone and proven on the ground that we work with them. We've gone and proven by building schools there. I have an Eklavya school in my constituency, just been built. We're going to inaugurate it. All this was done. Now you actually have somebody coming up of the stature of Murmuji, whose life is extraordinary. I mean, just by the look, if you read a biodata, I don't think so anybody would not want to support her. You've seen this across the country. Everybody is rooting for her. We're all hoping that she becomes the president of India. We all know she will now become president of India. And with an exemplary life she's led. Look at the past presidents the BJP has given. Abdul Kalam Azad ji. We've had Ramnath Kovind. None of these have had any shadows of any kind of doubt on them, their tenure.
I'll talk to you about the criticism that's coming in even with the past presidents as far as the opposition is concerned. But let me quickly bring in Tushar and Rashid as well. Tushar, to you first. As I said, as far as the numbers were concerned, it was never a contest because you knew that the NDA's candidate will become the president as far as the country is concerned, and Draupadi Murmu will become the first tribal president. But optically speaking, as far as the political support is concerned, that sends a larger message for an opposition that is very, very aggressive and wants to have bigger ideas about 2024. Isn't it embarrassing when party after party actually comes and supports the NDA's candidate? In that scenario, wouldn't it have actually been better for the opposition also to drop their candidate altogether and just give support to Draupadi Murmu?
Ridhima, it's days like this when you celebrate democracy, 700 odd MPs, 4,000 odd MLAs voting for India's next president. But now the bigger question is that has the opposition missed an opportunity? Absolutely yes. President to be Draupadi Murmu always had the numbers with her. That was never a doubt. If you look at the Electoral College, if you look at the numbers, that was never a doubt. It wasn't even a close fight. It was a landslide victory. Now, the opposition says that the BJP has not acted in the spirit of cooperative federalism. They could have acquainted the opposition with the candidate. But even within the journalist circles, there were murmurs about Draupadi Murmu being the candidate for the NDA. Even in 2017, there were murmurs. So probably the opposition either could have waited out. But if they couldn't have waited out, they knew that they had been let down by 2 or 3 other people, including Farooq Abdullah, who turned out the offer to run for president. And then it came to Yashwant Singh. They could obviously have asked him to quit the presidential race, to back out of the race. And that would have sent a larger message. It's not about what party she is backed by. It's about what she represents. The first tribal president, a woman who started her career in Odisha, who has been the governor of Jharkhand. And while the opposition may worry that she'll be a rubber stamp, if you look back at her career, she's taken some tough calls as the governor during the BJP government back in 2016. Number 2, we talk about the NDA having the numbers. It also represents between 2012, when 60% of the Electoral College numbers were with the UPA, to today when there are just 35%. So it also represents the swift erosion of the UPA across the country. And I have a hunch, Ridhima, we are just looking at the 61-62% NDA MP MLAs who will be voting for Draupadi Murmu. When the numbers finally come out on July 21, we'll realize the cross-voting is far more greater than any of us would have anticipated.
No, I'll talk about the cross-voting issue with Aishwarya in just a bit. But Rashid, where do you stand on this? Is this just about the candidature, or is this larger as far as the ideology and what that candidate represents? Because I agree partly with what Tushar is saying, that it was never about the numbers. Even if you look at the percentage, I believe the percentage for Draupadi Murmu could be somewhere around 60%, and for Yashwant Sinha close to 40%. But it's about what that candidate represents as a tribal who comes from humble backgrounds, again as a woman candidate. Should there have been better calculation as far as the opposition was concerned?
Ridhima, first of all, we must understand democracy is all about numbers. Democracy is all about contest. It is not, you see, consensus in classical political science theories of democracy. It has no place there. We have had, many presidents, except with the exception of Neelam Sanjeeva Reddy, all presidential candidates to the stature of Radhakrishnan, Rajendra Prasad, APJ Kalam, all. It was not that the BJP or the Bharatiya Janata Sangh was giving walkovers to the very credible people like Radhakrishnan and Zakir Hussain and several others. So they always forced a contest, and this is a healthy thing. So this is the entire argument that the opposition should have considered, Draupadi Murmu's credentials and given, her support is quite flawed.
Okay.
And it does not match the test of democracy, because you look at every MLA, every MP is, gets elected by contest. So it's all about numbers. Somebody may get 60%, somebody may get 40%, somebody may get 5%. So this is first thing we must understand. Yes, the opposition strategy was flawed. It was very tardy. We didn't see Sonia Gandhi or Rahul Gandhi in a very active role, with the choice of presidential candidate was there, or vice presidential candidate was there within the UPA or the non-NDA components. We saw more proactive by Mamata Banerjee and Sharad Pawar and Sitaram Yechuri. So it's quite a telling commentary. And as you rightly pointed out, many people like JMM and Shiv Sena, they just, they were seen, if you get these old pictures, they were there at the time of, filing of nomination papers of Mr. Yashwant Sinha, but now they voted against. Yeah. So this is the kind of thing which opposition has to bear all this, as when the BJP and other political parties were in opposition, they also had to undergo all such things.
And the reason that I wanted to build this before I go across to the issue of cross-voting, and Aishwarya, I want to bring you in here. There is no denying the fact that this becomes very, very embarrassing. Mohammad Mukim, Congress MLA from Odisha, you have Shivpal Yadav from Pragatishil Samajwadi Party, you have an NCP MLA. What does this then mean as far as an opposition's unity is concerned? This becomes very embarrassing when you have your own MLAs not have faith as far as your candidate is concerned.
I think a vote on very serious issues of consciousness is acceptable, but a vote on coercion or corruption, especially in light of the allegations that Mr. Sinha is making, is extremely unfortunate. And when you talk about this idea of the opposition and what is happening to their unity and whatnot, let's talk about the larger picture. You've seen how opposition-run governments are being dismantled systematically with the support of every institution available, and a vote of free consciousness, you see, is something that does not even exist. A recent example of Maharashtra. So when you bring out this larger issue of voting, whether she'd already crossed over, made the sufficient numbers and whatnot, a vote on your consciousness is what is more critical, and of course the party will examine. But let me add one small thing. We gave ourselves a Dalit precedent, and you saw unprecedented rise in the crimes against Dalits, whether it was Una or even the SC-STP plan that you saw that centrally came out. You saw the funding was cut. You saw, somebody spoke about an Ekalavya school and whatnot. I know what is happening to the Moraji schools in my state, which is also a BJP-run state. And you realize that just because you have a figurehead representing one community does not allow you to abdicate your responsibility to the entire community. You cannot say, I have made a tribal a precedent, so I will not ensure the development of all of them as a community. And I hope now that what happened to Mr. Kovind's community does not happen to Ms. Murmu's community, because just because a figurehead is there, the government can move ahead to completely, whether it's the Forest Rights Act or whether it's a dilution of their land titles, whether the fact that the tribals do not even have a right of ownership over what they have because of the amendments. You see that there is systemic problems for this community Madam represents. And we really hope the BJP will come out and be magnanimous to even address these issues rather than just making one of them.
I agree with the point that Aishwarya actually is making. And Anurag Sharma, I want to bring you in here. The point that Congress and the other opposition parties are essentially making this, that yes, it's great for optics when you have a Dalit president or when you will have a tribal president, but what about the reality on the ground? Because there is a big lag, and as Aishwarya was pointing out, that just by having a Dalit president, did the atrocities on Dalits increase? Unfortunately not. Also, if you look at the fact as far as a tribal speaker is concerned, that actually came from the Congress first, and it was the BJP that had opposed it. So is it just using a convenient identity card today and did not have the same support when it was not in power? That's the criticism that's coming in.
Okay, now let me address this on two fronts. One, when you do appoint somebody to a post, a constitutional post, and the highest post in the country, it empowers the community. It actually makes them feel a part of the mainstream of India. So the major thing which happens when you empower a community, every atrocity, every crime which is committed tends to get reported easily. Secondly, it gets magnified by the media. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's a good thing gets magnified by the media. Once it gets magnified by the media, people get much more proactive. It's not only about the BJP, it's about the society as a whole. So every such thing which gets magnified, does the society respond adequately? Secondly, if you look at it politically, what we've done on the ground is shown in the UP results. If you actually look at the UP results, analyze it, and I analyze them on a constant basis in my constituency, we've noticed a lot more people from the SC community are now becoming BJP voters. Why are they becoming? BJP voters. They are not only becoming BJP voters because Ramnath Kovindji is the Honorable President of India. They're becoming BJP voters because the BJP has done a lot of work on the ground with them. We've constantly gone there. We've constantly helped them. We're trying to do as much as possible in the fastest manner possible. In the last 75 years, there's been a sea change. Why are we constantly winning? We're constantly winning because we are working on the ground with them. The same thing happens with the scheduled tribes or the Adivasis. On the Adivasi front, BJP has constantly worked not only as the government, we've also worked as a party.
So the BJP is saying that there is a lot of thought that's gone behind as far as these nominees and candidates are concerned. It's unfair to call them just rubber stamp appointees. I quickly also want to go back to Tushar and Rashid, and I quickly want to talk about the vice president candidates as well. Tushar, I want to bring you in first. So from a tribal phase, the narrative has been about a Kisan Putra as far as the VP candidate by the NDA is concerned, Jagdeep Dhankar. Now, as far as flashpoints on Bengal is concerned and law and order is concerned, we've seen what's taken place between the BJP and the TMC. Once this moves because of the election of the vice president to the Rajya Sabha, how do you see this playing out?
See, there are two ways to look at it. One, of course, what transpired in Bengal between Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee and the governor over there. And two, also, that is this about sending out a larger message? Because we saw that the Chief Minister in Bengal was flouting the norms, the rules that were set when it came to the cooperation between the Chief Minister and the governor. You had the MLAs and the MPs in the TMC almost abusing the governor. So, of course, this sends out a message, for one. Number two, I partially agreed with Rashid also that democracy is all about numbers and the opposition has all the right to float its candidate and fight for it. But the problem here is that it's the opposition MPs and MLAs that are suffering the conundrum between their identity and their ideology. And that is why you see a lot of cross-voting happened earlier today. And I also want to respond to Aishwarya's point about systematically governments being decimated. Even if I were to give her the benefit of doubt, in Jharkhand, it's MLAs of the Congress coalition government who want to back the NDA presidential candidate. In Maharashtra, where Shiv Sena, whatever is left for it, it's the Shiv Sena under the Thakres again that wants to back the NDA government, NDA presidential nominee. So you can say that it's about systematically decimating the governments, but it's also about people, MPs and MLAs opting over the identity, over what Draupadi Murmu represents and also the vice president, over what the party represents. We also need to understand this.
Okay. Rashid, final word to you. Where do you see this headed as far as the VP candidates are concerned?
I think the VP candidate was actually Sharad Pawar's choice and Sitaram Yechury's choice. So it says a lot about Congress losing its place as a national political party or someone which is capable of leading the opposition pack. One more thing we must remember, Ridhima, in the entire thing, when we say about a particular person, that identity politics you were talking about, look at it doesn't happen. There is no empirical evidence that can match that, a particular presidential candidate or person who was holding the presidential office did something, good for the community or the community benefited. You look at Gyani Zail Singh, who was president between 82 to 87, and, Punjab separatism went to such a level that a prime minister was assassinated and things became from bad to worse. I remember when UPA had appointed Pratibha Patil as the first woman president of India, there was a lot of fanfare as if the UPA would get some traction on gender lines, and you know what happened in 2014 and till now. So this is all examples are there. I think we should take not a pinch of salt, but the bag full of salt that disclaims that somebody who belongs to a particular caste would bring some kind of traction in terms of electoral success.
Aishwarya, final word to you. As I said, cross-voting, extensive support that we have seen. Is there still a lot of thinking for the Congress to do before they can confidently say there is enough unity as far as a combined opposition for 2024 is concerned?
The idea of a combined opposition does not commonly or is not only prerogative of the Congress party, though we've been very magnanimous in allowing that sort of conversation from all other regional parties as well. But the opposition leaders and the other parties also are equally at stake and have equal responsibility to ensure opposition unity. And I really hope, I want to end this on a positive note by saying I really, really hope that Ms. Margaret Alva, comes forth as the vice president, because not only her credentials are exemplary, but as a woman who has been here for decades and the manner in which she has worked, and she's a personal role model of mine being from my state, I really hope that we can have a historic moment where a woman from a minority community, not only her community, but as a woman who has achieved so much, can be the vice president of this country, to see iconically that both the top posts today in our country will be held by women. And I really hope that the parties vote with their consciousness and not coercion in any manner. And we hope to be positive to see what happens next.
Okay. We'll have to unfortunately leave that conversation there. I'd like to thank all the representatives of the political parties, Rashid as well as Tushar. We're actually now shifting our focus to the other big story that we're tracking this evening. And this is a story that's coming in from Tamil Nadu. On the 13th of July, a student jumped off the third floor of a hostel building in Kalakurchi in Tamil Nadu. Police said she left a note that says she was struggling in several subjects and that she was humiliated by her teachers. But her family is not seeing this as the complete truth. They are now alleging that two teachers had mentally harassed and humiliated her. Remember, yesterday, massive protests broke out, buses were vandalized, even a lathi charge took place. The Madras High Court today outlined their order on the death. As per their order, another autopsy will be conducted. A special team will also be formed to identify the accused, and the court will be monitoring the probe into the violence that took place. Section 144 is currently in place as far as the district is concerned. Meanwhile, a lot of pressure on the state government. Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin has said that those responsible for the violence will be brought to justice. The CBCID has also arrested the school principal, math and chemistry teachers, along with 192 others in connection with this violence. I'll take the larger question to our guest in just a bit, which is that will politics ensure there's actual justice given to the student and to her family? But first, let's bring you a timeline of what really happened, what led to the kind of vandalism that we saw over the weekend. On the 13th of July, a class 12 student of a private residential school was found dead. The family is now claiming there is foul play that has been involved, suspected to have ended life by jumping from the top floor. But the family is saying the real truth still hasn't come out. The post-mortem indicates there are injuries before death, some serious injuries that were reported, and discrepancies in what was apparently found in that suicide note and what the family is now claiming. Then on the 17th of July, as I pointed out, violent protests in Kalakurchi broke out after protesters clashed with cops. There was a lot of vandalism. As I said, lathi charge was also seen. On the 18th of July, the CBCID has arrested the school principal, the math and the chemistry teacher, along with 192 others. Section 144 in place. The state government is saying that all possible action will be taken. But as I said, there were some observations that came from the Madras High Court as well. First, state should form a special team to identify the accused. As I pointed out, the family has claimed that there are discrepancies. Appears to be organized crime, doesn't appear to be a mere provocation, because just look at the kind of numbers that we saw in protesters and also the kind of vandalism that took place. So are we to believe that these were just parents? Also, take action against writers, file status report by the 29th of July. That was again a word that came from the Madras High Court. Family must accept the body as soon as the second post-mortem is done. So they did order for a second autopsy as well. Final rites also must be conducted in a peaceful manner. This, of course, was an advisory as far as the family members were concerned. So we'll really have to see how this really pans out. We've heard a word from the state government as well. But the question that we're asking this evening is, will politics actually ensure justice? Now, CNN News 18 has accessed the suicide note left behind by the girl. The Kalakurchi girl student alleged pressure from the math chemistry teacher. Suicide note points to staff pressure mounting, torture from school teachers. And this is where the family is saying that the complete truth is still not out. My colleague Purnima Murli is getting us more details. So Purnima, from the suicide note that we've accessed here at CNN News 18, there was alleged pressure from the math and the chemistry teachers. And these are exactly the same teachers who've also been arrested today.
Absolutely. There was a suicide note left behind by the girl, which the police had found when they were, looking for leads after the death of the girl, and then they found the suicide note. However, she died on Tuesday. On Wednesday, the family staged a protest demanding a re-postmortem because they thought that the autopsy report was just a cover-up, and they wanted a fair and thorough probe into the case. And now, after protests turned violent yesterday, we saw the police take action. The principal was arrested yesterday, and today also 2 teachers have been arrested, and these are the math and the math and the chemistry teacher. In the suicide note that we have access, the girl says that she was tortured by the chemistry teacher, and the chemistry teacher and the maths teacher also, both of them together tortured her and wanted her to score more marks. Even though she was getting good grades, she was still tortured by them, and she had penned down an emotional note and apologized to her father, her mother, and all her relatives, and also said that the school should return the fees that her parents had paid, because she said that she is not going to live long. So that was what was mentioned in the suicide note, saying that it was because of the harassment and torture by 2 teachers from her school that she decided to end her life. And that's something that the parents had said. And finally, only after there were many protests that we've seen over the last 1 week, action has been taken after they recovered the suicide note. Only after 5 days did they take action against the school management.
Purnima, thanks a lot for getting us all those details. Let me also now introduce our guest to take the discussion forward. We have political analyst S. Muralidharan. We also have Pula Rao, political analyst, DMK supporter. And we also have Shri Priyanka Nandakumar, State Quarters Secretary, Tamil Nadu Nursery, Primary and Higher Secondary Schools Association. Good to have all of you on the broadcast with us. Priyanka, let me begin with you with the suicide note that we've accessed here at CNN News 18. More details are now emerging of the alleged torture by various teachers that the student went through and then was unable to take it anymore and decided to take that unfortunate step. The math and the chemistry teacher are also the teachers who've also been arrested. But I want to understand, from the 13th when this incident took place till the 17th, there was no real action on the ground. But it also leads to a lot of responsibility and accountability as far as the role of the school and college authorities are concerned. That why were multiple pleas and complaints by the student not paid heed to?
So here it's a very saddening situation where we have lost a child, lost a student. Whatever may be the reason, the judiciary and the government should take strict actions against them. So when you say the school management hasn't taken the necessary actions, we agree with you, because even we were surprised when we saw the suicide note. At least when they handed it over to the police department, they should have taken necessary actions. If it is really because of the 2 teachers, then they should be warned or punished. Definitely they should be punished so that this don't continue. And if you see, this has been happening for the past few years. Children committing suicide because of pressure in academics. And when you see in Srimati's case, she's been a student who's good at studies, good at academics. So this is not something that should occur to her. But when this has happened, this serious actions need to be taken. So the management and the teacher is definitely to be answered for all the crimes that has happened in the campus. All that the private school association has been protesting and requesting the government is to give us prevention, like how we have given the private hospitals prevention against violence for our private institutions. We are not saying do not punish the criminals, do not punish the ones who are accused. They should definitely be punished, because what the family has lost, nobody can give back, and we don't want more Srimatis to come in this nation. So we want this to stop here, so they should be punished. But when you talk about private schools in Tamil Nadu, we are around 20,000 recognized affiliated schools in the state.
You know, I also want to understand what is the kind of sensitization that we can possibly adopt in our schools between teachers and students, because this really isn't the first case. And I'll talk about that in just a bit. But Pula, I want to bring you in first. Now, the family is alleging that a lot of times these issues were raised, but no possible heed was given to that. So I want to understand what is the kind of action that will be taken at that level. And more importantly, the kind of vandalism that we saw play out on the ground. Surely these can't just be parents of various students? Because we're putting out the pictures also. Corridors were destructed, two-wheelers were destructed, walls were vandalized. Is there a sense possibly that there was some sort of provocation as far as this vandalism is concerned?
You see, as far as the vandalism is concerned, there's no doubt a huge mob has come. The government has also reported on it. The chief minister has commented on it. And he says this has to be the work of outsiders, because 2,000, 3,000 people suddenly assembling together on the basis of WhatsApp messages and others means there's an organization behind it. And that is something, as we just heard, the 20,000 odd schools don't want such things. They want protection. Therefore, that's one aspect of it. The law and order and the protection for this vast number of private educational institutions across Tamil Nadu. But you go on to the other side, and then you say, what has to be done? It sounds a little careless. Can every school be responsible for the performance of a student? I believe most of these incidents are usually occurring in private institutions where they pay fees, and there's a high degree of competition. And another feeling is the student must succeed, he must do well. There's a lot of pressure. Is it from home? Is it from the teachers? All that will now come out. The High Court has ordered a second autopsy. So that second autopsy in the presence of the father and the lawyer will show us what were the real causes. Whether suicide, whether there was abetment, whether there was violence before that. That will be clarified immediately. So that will give a lot of relief in the sense we know what happened. But for the larger issue, there has to be something. These episodes are occurring often. The students are involved. They're under pressure. They commit suicide. They're unable to cope. This is a problem which across India and in Tamil Nadu, they have to adjust. Now, students, why should they be put under this pressure? What is the exam system that is making them so horribly unable to cope? So that's a larger issue. And definitely it has to be addressed, because thousands and thousands of students or lakhs of students are spending their time
we say
in
students
misery.
are the future as far as our country is concerned. I want to understand what is the kind of safe ecosystem or environment that we're giving to them when they want to only focus on studies. S. Muralidharan, as I said, unfortunately, this is not the first case that we're seeing that is being reported. So I'm also trying to understand the larger issue as far as our teacher-student relationship and the ecosystem in which students are studying today.
Yes, Ridhima, I think students are under pressure, no doubt about it. But you also have to accept that teachers have a huge responsibility. You need to understand the private teachers are paid only 1/3 of the government teacher's salary. But all these private teachers are held responsible for their kids to clear the NEET exam or an engineering entrance exam, etc. Whereas your government school teachers, they go scot-free because they have no responsibility. And they say it's a private government schools, we will not be able to clear NEET. So that's the kind of excuse they give. So there is responsibility and pressure on the private teachers. That's one side. Second is, let's understand, see, we have done away with things like corporal punishment. There's no teachers beating up a kid anymore. Even if somebody is doing it, there are videos surfacing and next day they get arrested. When such situations arise, I don't think we can straight away blame the teachers, saying that, they are the ones who are, even if the girl has written a suicide note saying that the teachers are, torturing me or whatever. I'm sure she has spoken about it earlier also. And it's the responsibility of the school management as well as the parents to get together and solve it. And if they're not done it, I think it's irresponsible parenting as well as education. I mean, the academics of the
Priyanka,
school.
I'll give you the final word, and I quickly want to go back to where the lapses were. Look at what the family has gone on to say. The family has gone on to say that there were so many injuries which find no mention as far as the autopsy report is concerned. The autopsy report mentioned multiple injuries and hemorrhage as the cause of death. This is where the family is alleging that their child was tortured by her teachers. How can the school today completely abstain themselves as far as any accountability is concerned? Because there is also a fear that there could be many other students who could be enduring exactly the same thing.
Yeah, definitely nobody can escape from the eyes of laws. And here, when the father has requested for the second autopsy and the court has also agreed to it. So let's see what happens in that. And whatever has happened, the child is no more. So all that I am concerned about, or the entire private school association is concerned about, is that this don't repeat. So I am here to, tell you that we have already decided to introduce some counseling sessions in the school. And like Muralidharan sir rightly mentioned, the teachers are also in high pressure and nobody is harming any child intentionally. But if anything like that has happened, they should definitely be punished. But here in this case, we are not clear about what exactly has happened.
The
But
second
in
autopsy
future,
actually
when
will
we
answer
don't
a
want
lot of these larger questions of what really went wrong, and hopefully that will bring some sort of closure for the family, and also will have clear mechanisms in place to ensure that this is not repeated. Unfortunately, I've completely run out of time. I'd like to thank all our guests. We're now shifting our focus to some other breaking details coming in. We're now understanding the Supreme Court will hear Nupur Sharma's fresh modification application tomorrow. Nupur Sharma is the now suspended spokesperson of the BJP. Sources are telling CNN News 18 that Nupur Sharma has said in her plea that after the Supreme Court's observation and criticism, the fringe group has renewed their threat to her life and also giving her rape threats. That's the update that we're picking up by the means of sources telling CNN News 18. Ananya Bhatnagar, our legal correspondent, is getting us all these details. So, could you just break down the details that you're picking up by the means of sources of what Nupur Sharma has exactly said in her plea, Ananya?
Well, yes, definitely. Nupur Sharma has sought the expunging of all those observations that have been made against her into this whole case when she had knocked the doors of the top court seeking clubbing of all the FIRs registered against her over her profit remarks. And now in her petition, she says that after the observations of the top court calling her loose and all, so she has been facing immense threat to her life, and also renewed rape threats have been given to her. Apart from that, what is very, very interesting to note is that the matter would be heard same bench that had given out these observations, which includes Justice Suryakant and Justice J.B. Pardiwala. So it would be very, very interesting to see as to what new grounds Nupur Sharma and a lawyer raises, because it is a very, very important aspect for Nupur Sharma, because this is the second time she would be appearing before the same bench which had made those observations, calling her and also blaming her completely for the Udaipur violence. So we'll have to wait and watch as to how the legal team of Nupur Sharma preps up for tomorrow, because it is an important day. The matter has been filed today itself and has been listed by the Chief Justice before the bench of Justice J.B. Pardiwala and Justice Suryakant. So we'll have to wait.
Okay.
This becomes a matter of criticism, or whether some kind of relief is granted to Nupur Sharma. Remember that she has asked all of these FIRs to be clubbed back to Delhi, because the Delhi FIR was the first one that was registered against her, and this is the...
Okay. Ananya, we actually seem to be losing your audio, but thanks for getting us all those details. This, of course, is a story that we'll keep tracking very, very closely. For now, we're slipping into a very short break, but don't go anywhere. When we come back, we get you a wrap of all the other stories.